This is a picture of South Africa, land of the color. Look at these people. Look especially at the children, to whom so rightfully belongs. Their ancestors, the Matabellas and other Bantu peoples, were farmers and cattle herdsmen, gifted artisans, brave and disciplined warriors. The great kingdoms of the and bullets. This is an uncensored picture of the Union of South Africa, the land of diamonds and gold, of manganese and, heaven help us, uranium for atom bombs. It is the home of 8 million Africans, 300,000 Indians, and 1 million other colored peoples. 2 million British and Dutch lord it over these peoples and exploit them with bare knuckles. The conquerors robbed the people of this rolling green country and squeezed the Africans into 1/8 of the land. The conquerors levied taxes upon the Africans, taxes which had to be paid in money, money which could only be earned by digging in the white man's mines, tending his herds, working on his farms. Out of the South African mines, out of the sweat of these Africans, flows a vast stream of gold and diamonds to all parts of the world. New York gets its share of the loot. Pretty nice, eh? Yes. That's what those who control and operate this system of oppression and robbery think. Pretty nice. Well, let's take a look at this system and see how it works. Africa is the second largest continent in the world. The whole continent, down to the last square mile, is ruled directly or indirectly by Britain, France, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, Italy, yes, and the United States too. South Africa is called a self-governing British Dominion. The white rulers of South Africa pride themselves on the beauty of their cities today. 50 years ago, the city of Johannesburg was just an ugly mining camp. Gold. Gold in the bowels of the earth, and cheap black labor to dig it out, built this modern city, and the fortunes of those who have followed after Cecil Rhodes, the empire builder. Today, American wealth and power is very much in evidence in South Africa. You will find such familiar names as General Motors, Ford, Firestone, Goodyear, and Coca-Cola. Well, such are the cities the white man has built for himself in South Africa. And this is what he has left to the Africans. What you just saw was an open cesspool of garbage and human excrement, the usual landmark of the ghetto areas where the people to whom the country belongs are compelled to live. Here is a sample of their living quarters. Does this look somewhat familiar to you? Of course, this might be Birmingham, Alabama, Harlem, or the shanties of Negroes in the very shadow of the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Contrast this shantytown with the office buildings, the fancy apartment houses, the ornate mansions and other luxuries enjoyed by the rulers who have taken for themselves the wealth of this country. The forced labor of black people gave them their wealth, slave labor to extract the wealth from the soil which now is spent and useless. Plunder, neglect, and the draining of the able-bodied manpower from the pasture land has turned the once green and fertile land into a bleak and forbidding landscape. The living quarters of the Africans in the cities, called locations, are as bleak and forbidding as the landscape. They live here because they are forced to do so by law. The government keeps them herded here so that it can keep an eye on them and their activities, and always have a reserve supply of labor. Some of these miserable shacks are not even large enough to be dog kennels. Here is the one faint-hearted attempt of the government to provide housing for the Africans. These are brick huts. The holes are windows, one hole for each section. The holes have to serve as chimneys as well as windows. Those stones keep the roofs from blowing off. There were so few of these brick boxes with holes, and they became so overcrowded that pretty soon the residents had to build their own lean-tos with broken crates and tin cans and gunny sacks. Even these hovels in the locations come high. Rents take half of the Africans' meager earnings. Not being able to afford even this, some Africans build this shantytown with their own police, municipal officers, and judges. They called it Tobruk because it was so much like the desert prison camps the Nazis set up in North Africa during the last war. These shanties are by no means fair examples of the skill and ability of the African people. Given half a chance, time, and material, even the unskilled African can build houses like this Basuto home you might find in a somewhat freer part of Africa. Children suffer the worst. They have no schools and no playgrounds. Undernourished, unsheltered, they are ill when they are alive, and they die early. In some areas, as many as 700 of every 1,000 African babies die in their first year of life. Contrast this with the 42 out of every 1,000 white babies. In surroundings like these, an African is lucky to be alive at 36. In the same city, a white man can normally look forward to reaching the age of 60. The way the African is forced to work does not make for a long life. Here is a part of the system we were speaking of. The raw material of the gold mines and the muscle for getting it out of the earth. These African miners are recruited, that is, sometimes forced, sometimes coaxed with promises of good times in the big city to work in the mines under contract. Thousands of them are lured and imported from as far north as Nyasaland, the Rhodesias, and the Congo. During the whole length of their contract, from 6 months to a year, they are confined to barracks on mine property and are separated from their families and from all normal social life. They get some cash pay, something to eat, and quarters shared with 20 other men. All this costing the owners of the mines about 60 cents a day for each worker. The African gets about 35 cents a day in cash. White workers, doing the same work as the African, get 10 times as much in wages. On payday, there is a collector waiting to take as much as $4 in taxes from the black worker. From what is left of his handsome salary, the African worker must support his family hundreds of miles away and pay for his own work boots and clothes and other needs. Deep down in the mines, miles underground, they slave and sweat in the suffocating heat and lung-puncturing dust. In 50 years, these Africans have dug out of their own earth $16 billion worth. In 1949, the mine owners made a profit of about $100 million. Unable to tolerate these conditions, over 60,000 African gold mine workers went on strike in 1946. Their protest was broken mercilessly by the police and the militia. In South Africa, it is against the law for black workers to bargain collectively or go on strike. Now, from these great mountains of waste ore from the gold mines, uranium ore is to be extracted to be shipped to the United States, along with the thousands of tons of manganese for war stockpiles in this country. From the caracal of lambs, beautiful coats are made. Caracal is the black diamond of Southwest Africa. Each lamb skin is worth $10. These shepherds earn as little as $1 a month. The sheep often have better housing than their watchers. This African carpenter is his own teacher, for the law prohibits him from learning or working at a skilled trade. For Europeans only, which means for whites only, hits the man with dark skin in the face wherever he turns in South Africa. Jim Crow is Jim Crow all over the world. The African is imprisoned in the system which South Africa's rulers call Apartheid, total segregation and discrimination. To move from one place to another in his own homeland, he has to have a pass, a passport, a pass to leave his reserve in the country or his location in the city, a pass to seek work, a pass to be on the white man's streets at night, a pass to prove he has paid his tax. Not only are the Africans segregated, the Indians and other colored peoples are kept apart from both the whites and the Africans. The ancestors of these Indians were brought here almost a century ago as indentured laborers. They were promised equal status with white South Africans once their contracts were fulfilled, a promise never meant to be kept. A new law called the Group Areas Act gives even more arbitrary power to the government to order Africans, Indians, and other colored peoples where to live. This padlocked fence separating Africans and Indians living on the same street symbolizes the desperate divide and rule policy of South Africa. Like children everywhere, these too would like to play together. But again, Apartheid says no. The ghettos in the countryside or near the cities, the segregation and discrimination, the pass laws, all these are deliberately aimed at maintaining the cheap labor supply, controlling the people's movements and activities, and preventing the exploited and oppressed from uniting. The policeman's club and gun, the courthouse and the jail are the weapons of the white rulers. The code of oppression is backed by brute force. He who protests or resists is beaten down. Prison vans daily carry their loads of Africans to jail, and then white farmers come with their trucks, caged like this, to take the prisoners to work out their sentences. Look closely. This happened in Cape Town, South Africa, and this carbon copy of Jim Crow oppression is in New York City. Sunday afternoon in South Africa. White families with their children gather at this walled enclosure to view this brutal spectacle, planned, staged, and directed by the overlords. The whiplash goads the fighters on. The scene is a throwback to the decaying Roman society, which was fed similar arena spectacles to satisfy its bloodlust. It is the same bloodlust of a Mississippi lynch mob. Like bloodlust, lust for profit and power has now prompted the South African government to annex the mandated territory of Southwest Africa. The Hereros are one of the several tribes in this area who have lost their freedom. About 50 years ago, the Germans, waging a war of extermination, reduced the Hereros from 80,000 to 15,000 people. A procession of the Herero people gathers from near and far annually to pay homage to the ancestors killed by the Germans. Mandated to South Africa after the First World War, Southwest Africa has now been annexed by the government completely, despite several protests by the United Nations and an adverse decision by the International Court of Justice. The reason? Southwest Africa is rich in copper, gold, diamonds, and other minerals. Now the greedy fingers of the rulers of South Africa are reaching out for other neighboring territories, Bechuanaland, Basotholand, and Swaziland. When is aggression aggression? American Negroes have protested to the United Nations against the injustices which they suffer, but to no avail. Indians in South Africa have a spokesman in the UN through the official delegation from India, has spoken eloquently in the UN for the South African Indians. Africans have no representative of their own to speak for them at the UN or in the lily-white government of South Africa. Dr. Daniel Malan, Premier of the South African government, supported the Nazis during the Second World War. But the insistent demand for freedom that is sweeping the colonial world is felt in South Africa too. And in their struggle for freedom, the Africans have been joined by the Indians. Not so long ago, the Indians went on a campaign of passive resistance under the leadership of Dr. Y.M. Dadu. Women played a leading role in this campaign. These Indian women are being taken to jail. South Africans have organized mass demonstrations of protest. Led by Dr. Bakwi of the African National Congress, Dr. Moroka, and other leaders, they are carrying on a struggle for freedom that is rapidly rising in intensity. And women are in the vanguard of this struggle. They have refused to carry passes. They fight for decent housing. On May 1st, 1950, Africans and Indians joined hands, stopped work, and together staged a huge freedom demonstration despite the terrorization and murders of the police. And in so doing, they strengthened their unity.
I speak to you as the voice of the people whose suffering and struggle for freedom you have witnessed. We say to you in America, the war against fascism is yet to be won. The white supremacy government in South Africa is a fascist government. From what we have heard, it's the same in some parts of your country, as well as in other lands. You freedom-loving peoples of the United States, Negro and white, have a stake in the struggles of the African people. peace and democracy will come to our land and to this vast continent when we Africans own and control the vast wealth of our country. Then we will be able to live in dignity and equality with the other nations of the world. We of Africa call upon you to join with us to build a world of freedom and peace.